Welcome to our podcast Arquitectura Path. This is our 14th episode of our 4th season on Common Spaces, which was produced by Andres Felipe Rodriguez and myself, Maria del Mar Caicedo. We were inspired by the importance of habitat as a fundamental right in our cities, which are facing challenges such as climate change and globalization. We set out to explore the diversity of perspectives and solutions related to the configuration and use of public spaces. Through 16 interviews with national and international experts, we sought to understand how the design and management of these spaces can influence the quality of life of people and the construction of more inclusive and sustainable communities. In this episode, architect Edla from Angola, architect Joao from Brazil, and geographer Miguel from Angola took us on a narrative journey to learn about the processes of Atelier Hurbanos in Luanda, Angola. We were talking about how they have taken a community-driven approach to placemaking, involving locals in the design and construction process. Also, how they have transformed public libraries and bridges into a vibrant community space in order to create tactical urban interventions and aim to build sustainable projects. Edla, Miguel, and Joao think education is the key focus, teaching urbanism at a small, local scales to change the relationship and meaning of public spaces. We began our conversation by learning how Atelier Hurbanos was created and the people who make it up.
We are Atelier Hurbanos. We are a small business which focus in public spaces and placemaking as a core value of our interventions. We started to work with public spaces at the same time the pandemics of the COVID-19 kicked off around the world. So it was chaotic time, but it also helped us because we were never located at the same continent, us three at the same time. So because the COVID, the work dynamics started to shift from field work for remote work. So it was a dynamic that favored us in the beginning. Our first project was a library, a public library called 10 Padronizada, 10 Padronizada. It was a urban rehabilitation of a library that was constructed during the pandemics by two young boys from Luanda. And they were, during the pandemics, they thought, we have a lot of books, and we would like to provide the chance for more people to read those books. So they went to under a bridge and started a small library, and it called the attention of many people, and they kept working like 1 year without any infrastructure, only by their will. And we saw in their work opportunity to perform our first project. So we reached out, and since our interventions are mainly focused on the placemaking and the community participation on urban projects, so that's another fact about us. We don't do large projects. Like we work more on a neighborhood or local scale. We don't go like building huge parks or condom. I don't know. I forgot how to say that. We don't do
project.
Joao, you said that we were never in the same continent, but we also come from different backgrounds. Joao is Brazilian from São Paulo. Are you from São Paulo, Joao? Sorry.
Yes.
Miguel and I are Angolans from Luanda.
We were about to start our conversation about public space in Luanda, but we needed to know about this city. What are its qualities?
And there's a particularity of Luanda is a city that every aspect of public spaces are used, and mainly for informal activities. So there's already this particularity of our city that people use public spaces for their convenience and for their activities that are not planned and not recognized by the municipality. So when these two young men adapted the bridge, like the inferior part of the bridge, as a library, other activities were already undergoing under the bridge, such as informal sellers selling alcoholic drinks or cigarettes, and even this part of the city was used to criminal activities. So it's not only a project of an urban project of urban planning or participatory urbanism, but it's a project of reconversion of activities.
Angola itself, specifically Luanda, is a very complex context when we're talking about architecture or even urban spaces and the way we deal it, I'd say, from legislation to the general architecture of it. So when these two young men started this library under a bridge, it's literally an open bridge in a very poor neighborhood of Luanda. They had this idea, we're going to take a few books under the bridge, and if people want to read, they can join and read for free. So when it would rain, they didn't have cover, so people couldn't really have access to the books. And then they reached a time where they had a lot of books, and they had to carry the books from the bridge to their house and vice versa. So they had a lot of challenges, a lot of issues. And around that time, we were building Hurbanos, and Edla was the one that had the idea of starting Hurbanos, because Edla is urban planner, Joao is an architect, and I'm the guy that just showed up. So I just joined, and I've been doing mostly project management for Urbanos, helping finding partners, sponsors, and trying to organize everything whenever it's possible. So around that time, we were building Urbanos, and we were looking for our first project that could be our first thing to be added to our portfolio. So it was kind of a perfect match, because there we had those guys starting a library, like literally in an open air without any support, without any condition. And on the other side, it was us trying to build something for the city. So we reached out to them and we presented a few ideas. And we often try to use, apart from the placemaking element, we try to use design thinking as well when we are building our projects. So we really want to talk to the people and understand what they need and understand if the solution that we are offering or proposing makes sense to what they need. So we had a few meetings with them. We did some data collection as well, just to understand the needs, to understand what we could change, to understand the concept behind having books at that point specifically, and to understand if they didn't want to go to a different location, because it was a public space, open space. It rains a lot, and it's literally a bridge that people use to cross, like from this side of the road to the other side. So it's a public space, and you kind of need authorization to use those spaces. And the people that were building the library, they have like a very political history as well. So a lot of elements were behind that. But we reached out to them to understand what they needed. We came up with a few proposals, and I think João can show that later on, because he's the architect and he can explain about that as well. So we showed them some concept that we wanted for the library. And one of the first components that we were trying to tackle with the work we did there was the element of them closing whenever it rained. So we basically installed a container in a public space for them to store the books. And we showed a design. I think John has the design on how we wanted the container to be. We filled in the place because it was literally mud. It was mud. So when it rained, it was like very, very, very hard to use the space. So we reached out to a few sponsors. We had a few meetings. We showed them like the project that we wanted. We even had some element of recycling, because they had a lot of waste around the area as well. So we wanted like them to at least consider recycling and having the space cleaner. So we connected them with local stakeholders that work with recycling. So they could have like a cleaner space, a space where kids can go without having any issues. So there were a lot of elements to reimagine and to improve the space. And the base of what we do is around that, rethinking places and spaces, improving spaces however we can. And that's the base, and that's the project that we've been doing. We mostly come with the project and then try to find a sponsor, try to find a location where we can actually apply that. Because in Rwanda, you have a lot of like open spaces or public spaces that are not really used, or that they are not taken care very well. So we try to work with these spaces and drive conversations around that as well, around people in the city, around the relationship of people with the city. So these kind of things that we are trying to drive through Hurbanos, and that's what we've been doing the last, 4 years now, 3 years. That's what we have trying to do. So this was our first big project, but then we do the Urban October, where we run a few expositions, a few roundtables with the local government to discuss about the city, how we can improve it. the change that we can make, the laws that we can put in place. So we have this research element, then we have the more like intervention like type of job that we do as well. So in terms of Urbanos, I think this is a good description, João, if I'm not mistaken, of the work that we've been doing and that we are trying still to do, because we've been in the market for like 3 years, and at least the Angolan market is very small. And for you to do a small thing, a small project, there are a lot of red tapes. This is a very complex context where for you to build one thing, you have to deal like with 7 different government bodies and a lot of people. So it's very, very, very complicated, but we are trying to at least help how people look at the city and how people think about the city. I think that's the main drive of Urbanos for the last few years.
Until now, we needed to define the concept and the difference between placemaking and political urbanism. Joao was in charge of telling us about this.
So, as Miguel said, the Angolan context is quite exquisite. We have a lot of informal dynamics, and because of that, we can't just go and build infrastructure or just go there and start building our projects from scratch. We have at some level to bring people in, especially the communities. And that's the concept of placemaking. We bring people in so they can help us project. So the project is what they want, what they hope for, and not what we specialists think it's better. It's like a mix. We give our input and they give their inputs on our input. So the final project is something that it's a collective building. I think the difference between the tactical aspect and the placemaking itself is because tactical urbanism is on a neighborhood scale to create projects to improve something or to build something, create something. The placemaking is the part that bring the people in. So the library, for instance, we saw an opportunity. The placemaking comes when we bring everyone in the community, besides the 2 founders, and ask them for their input on our project. So we can adapt, adjust, and even build, because a large portion of our projects are built with community labor. So I think it starts on tactical urbanism, and then we use the placemaking component to really develop the project.
Just to add on that, and to add on the element of the context, I don't know how is it in Colombia, but in Angola, when we're talking about like the decision makers and when we're talking about the government level, they tend to make decisions without actually at least hearing the public and what the public needs. It's mostly, we think that this is right, so we're gonna implement this. So there isn't much intervention from the people on whatever they are trying to do. So with Urbanos, we try to involve the people on what we build to some extent. And we don't assume that we know or whatever we know or whatever we want is better for the actual people that we are designing a project for.
Okay, I have a question there. How do you guys see the future of those interventions? How do you think the government, the people involved, how do you think they're gonna support this project in the future? How is the future? How do you see that?
I think that's a great question. We were talking about that not a week ago. The library we built was 2 years ago, I think, and it's still open until now. And all the furniture, infrastructure, all the things that we projected for them are still in a good state. And they also got some visibility to the extent of being successful in some funding programs from ONGs. So I think that's also something I forgot to say. We never go only for the infrastructure side of things.
It was time to put the government on the table as a relevant actor for the sustainability of these interventions, right? So we asked them about these social dynamics in Angola. Let's see their answer.
As Miguel said, Angola is a society that has a lot of dynamics, a lot of informal dynamics and informal commerce. So we will always have to think in the sustainability of the project itself, how the people are going to maintain the project. So in this case, we projected inside the container pot so they can sell drinks, and we provided for them one printer so they can print stuff and make some money to help funding the maintenance of the space. So far, the libraries are only project that we build in that scale. The other projects we found was more like expositions, exhibitions, roundtables, mediating conversations between governments, people, the UN. So those are ephemeral projects.
Yeah. One thing that we try to do is to build things that are very sustainable. What we try to do is to involve different stakeholders that can give support. Of course, we cannot give the financial support. We give mostly the expertise and the guidelines on what to do after we're done with the projects. But in terms of financial support for the maintenance, try to involve the government, even at the local level. Then we try to involve companies. At times it's bank, through the social support system that they have, or through the social funding programs that they have, to see if they can fund our final users for them to deal with the daily maintenance of the spaces, just to keep the thing sustainable. So we try to make sure that we have a number of stakeholders that can provide support to place we made the intervention, or to the people for whom the intervention was made for. And another thing, and a big element that I believe, and this is something that we try to tackle, is education. You can make how many interventions you want, but if you don't educate the people to actually maintain the place, it just dies. So through our roundtables, through the exhibitions that we run, we tend to focus on this element of education. How do you think about a city, and how do you look at the city? Because the relationship that the people have with the spaces tend to have an influence on how they're going to maintain the place. In case of the library, it's like a personal project of the main stakeholders, of the two guys. So they have like a special feeling for the place. So the way they're going to take care of the place is different. But if you talk to most of the people in Luanda specifically, I'm not going to talk Angola. I'm going to talk about Luanda because that's where I'm from. Most people don't have like that deep connection with the spaces in the city. So that they don't look at the space with that special feeling, with that special love. So it's way harder to maintain even if you pay. So yeah, we focus on this element of education as well, just to make sure that we have like a sustainable solution, even when sometimes you don't even have the funds.
So I just wanted to maybe share a few documents so you can have like this visual thing about the Despadronizada library. People don't have this connection with public spaces because they're not functional. They are there, they're part of the city, but they are used to what is convenient for that moment and for that group of persons.
Okay, we were so interested in the relationships between these dynamics and processes in our countries. But we wanted to return specifically to the public space projects that Atelier Hurbanos have carried out. So we asked them about the multi-stakeholder relationships of their intervention.
For instance, the inferior part of the bridge, it had different occupations and different functionalities during the day. For instance, in the morning, it's a place for the we call zungueiras, informal sellers. At night, it was used for marginalized boys and groups. So when a place is not functional, people are going to adapt to their needs. And what we have managed, and I think it's 100% the job that these guys have made. They made structural, functional change in that place that it became a social change also. Like, we don't have much libraries for Luandan, for kids, for grown-ups. They're scarce. And they managed to change a habit. It's incredible that zungueiras, informal sellers, they own public spaces because they sell, these are their place of work. So kind of they rule, and they manage to change and shift that use and utility that the space had. And not only the change of the utility, but also a social change, because it's not usual for people to have access to library, not only to library, and they have access to an open library and free books. And that's the thing that most, that they would say that, is this for free? Do we have to pay an entrance? People wouldn't believe that they have books for free. And when the transformation we made to the place, and we had plants, and it became aesthetically pleasing in the peripheral area of the city. They would say things, oh, we don't need to go to the center of the city to be in an aesthetic pleasing public space. There's no need. We have it here. It's close to my house. It's close to my school. So you asked like how the political view of this. It was great for them. They came and support administrative part. They gave us the right documents, and I think they continue to support in that part. They gave current electricity they didn't have before. Now they have electricity running because the container had solar panels. Now they have electricity. And also the recognition for the job that the guys did. Like Miguel said, they had a political history. They were activists in constructing democracy. Maybe being an activist is, you don't have like, it's not very accepted openly or freely. We are starting to build and accept since we are stabilizing our democracy. But in that part, they had a little difficulties, and we recognized that as we came to talk to these partners. They had more. We used our privilege. We used our voice to talk for them. But now that we are like, we delivered the project, we set the right path, and now they have this. Not only the library is recognized as a public space, as a library, as a cultural location outside the center city, because we are used that all cultural places are located in the center of the city or noble parts of the city. But now you can see, if you have circuits of, like, for instance, you have an artist that is going to sell a book or is going to sell a CD, he's going to specifically choose some parts, some locations. And now you can see that Padronizada is always on that list. So it has not only for the political part that is now settled, but also culturally, it has its recognition.
I want to know if you have collaborated with the academy, such as universities or college or schools, because we know that the education must be transversal and multi-scalar, but I don't know if you have done this in these 4 years.
We've been trying to collaborate with unis, hence like the roundtables that we have from time to time, just to build some knowledge and to share some knowledge. We have actually already built the idea. What we're fighting on now is to find the sponsors, and we want to work with schools outside the city center or like the very urban places of Luanda. So we really want to go to marginalized points of the city and get to those marginalized schools and get kids to learn a little bit about urbanism. Because we are talking about education, and I think like education is key. And I feel like people around my age don't have that close relationship with the city anymore. So starting with the kids, you may shift how they look at the city and their relationship with the city. So what we're trying to do is teach you urbanism and then teach photography. So we're trying to combine both. So you have like this photography element just for you to train your eye and try to look at things that you usually don't look, but that they exist. So through photography, you can like, okay, observe things that you don't really have a look at.
Among everything we were talking about, we want to understand if these processes are related to the concept of known places, which are in all cities. Therefore, we asked them about their hacks and criteria for interviewing the places that have no meaning for the general population, but could be significant after placemaking in public space. This was what they told us.
It depends on the no place we're talking. I myself consider the shopping mall a no place. I mean, there's no really attachment there, no real meaning. So It depends. For me, a roundabout or an alley, you can do a project and transform and make people use. Now, a mall, you can't really do anything about it. You can't project something inside because it's a private place with public access. So I think that depends on the no place. If it's a place that it's a public space by nature, it's always possible to turn the place into something meaningful, to turn the no place into a place. Also, again, with the community participating and helping to construct the space, if they feel like they belong, the place will always have meaning and be some kind of heritage to someone. Now, the other no places like airports or shopping malls, I think what you can do is temporary interventions trying to achieve a desired outcome. As an example, 2022, we held an exposition on social inequality in Luanda in the scope of the Urban October, which was the theme was not leaving nobody behind. And we decided to hold this photography exposition with really shocking images into a mall, which mainly are frequented by rich people. And the primary concept was to build a wall with paper boxes. So the images were behind the wall. So when you walked into the mall, you didn't have access to the images. You had to go behind the wall to see the images. It was like we were trying to do a relation between day-to-day life in Luanda. You walk on the street, you see the misery, you see the social inequality, but you don't really see it. It's common. You don't pay attention. So that's how we use it at no place. We built an exposition and it stayed in the mall for 1 month during the October. And what we expected to achieve was to grow conscience in some people that the social inequality exists and you have to look deeper because it's part of our day-to-day life. So if you don't pay attention, if you don't seek how to help or try to do our part. So now, if the place is a public space like a roundabout or an alley or something you can build on, you can create meaning. You can always create meaning.
Regarding to no places and giving meaning to the space, Angola in general, it's a very complex space, and I feel like we have a very different dynamic to other parts of the world. One day you can like go to a completely open space with nothing, with no meaning. The following day you already have a market and it's already something that means a lot to people and you have commerce and all of that. I think even as like a specialist, it must be challenging to try to give meaning in spaces where you live in this country, where you have the element of culture and unpredictability. So you never know what will happen and how people will give meaning to the spaces. It's very complex. It's a very strange dynamics that I even don't understand at times. For instance, we had like a market called Roque a few years ago, and it was like a very famous heavy commerce like zone. And it was like a reference in Angola. Everybody will go there to buy stuff, to sell stuff, to do whatever. And one day the government decided we just need to take people out of there. And they took people out of there. So a place that had meaning, in a sense, became a no place, because nowadays it doesn't have any meaning at all. But then you have like other places where you had nothing, and the following day you have everything, and it means something to people. And it's really, really difficult to understand the dynamics and even the work around these elements.
Yeah, I feel like people from Luanda are very, very complex. And especially like I feel there's two different worlds where you have one Luanda that people live, basically spend 24 hours on outside on public spaces, living in the streets, they sell, they eat, they socialize, everything on public spaces. And then you have the other part of the city that is total opposite. They are in their cars, they work inside, everything it's inside, and they don't have this connection with the city. It's even a bad sign of social status to be sometimes outside.
As Colombians, we have a similar relationship with the public space in cities. Well, to insecurity and historical violence. This made us delve deeper into the relationship in Angola. Let's hear what happens in this country.
So there's kind of a strange relationship to being outside, being in public spaces and interaction with the city. So I think this reconversion or change of meaning of no places, it's gonna really depend on where is this place located and who uses it. I think it's easier when it's informal places because they have already this facility easy going to address and connect with public spaces. Sensitive aspects of urban planning and city and urbanism, it's very new. I would say we're kind of pioneers on that. If you want to address, maybe it's a challenge for us to go deeper, and that's one of the things that we want to do also. It's advocate and write articles, because I feel like here in Angola, urban planning, it's always about the big projects, mega city, like we say, transportation. It's always in a big scale projects. It's about Kilamba, urbanizations, airports. It's always in that kind of dimensions. We never talk about the space, the public space, the small scale, the human scale. It's not addressed. And this vision of urban planning that we want to bring to the cultural and the scientific aspects of urban planning here in Angola. And one thing that I was trying to present is the report of the Urban October that we did last year. We had 11 photographers, street photographers. Street photography is also something that has been developing around these few years. And we invited 11 photographers to expose their art in this team, like Joao said. It was a nice challenge to, like, as architects and like as creatives, to say how can we make people look differently. And maybe this exposition was directed to that group of people that I was talking before, those that don't have connection with public spaces, that look to that things that we shown through a glass. We used this map of vulnerability to conduct the exposition. So we addressed the human city, social prosperity, and urban well-being. We left participatory city and we focused on these three aspects. That so the place was shopping Fortaleza, that is located in the marginal of Luanda. So it's, let's say, the Fifth Avenue of New York. So it's the main avenue in central part of the city. And like we said, we chose 11 photographers with 32 photographies. We chose especially kids and also people with more of the vulnerable groups. So we wanted to show like that this group of people need to be taken care of when we look at the city and we plan the city. And the social prosperity, I think it's something that represents Luanda and Angolans. And yes, those are a few pictures. And the last part was the urban well-being, and that focused on the infrastructures and mobility and transportation in the city. We have now, the Zungueiras, the Candongueiros, and they are private transports in Luanda. They're collective, but they're private. So it's the main public transport for Luandans. And they help a lot of people, but they cause a lot of traffic too, because the way they conduct is very particular to the Candongueiros. And this also to represent the scarcity of access to water and other basic infrastructures in the city. So these were all of the pictures that we have chosen to represent prosperity and a better city. Here are some images of the wall that we constructed.
People that entered the mall couldn't see the pictures. They had to walk behind the wall to see the picture. It was like the focus group we are aiming. It was the people that goes from work to their home, to their home to work, and don't really leave the city. So you have to do something to see the social inequality, because it's there. We all see it, but if you don't pay attention, if you don't really make an effort, you can make it better.
We end our conversation with the desire to connect processes to the qualities of placemaking in contrasting contexts such as Angola and Colombia. As well, we invite you to look for the projects carried out in African countries, and of course to explore what Atelier Hurbanos has developed in Angola. And well, as you already know, our curiosity is huge and we continue in search of fascinating learning for you and us. We invite you to explore our conversation about the diversity of layers in the public space of our cities. Please don't miss out our season 4 Common Spaces.